what motivated me to put this bill in, but it came as a result of my very deep concern for an incident that occurred 5 miles from my house on September 23rd, 2007, when the Waldoboro police murdered a boy, Gregory Jackson, 18 years old, passenger in a vehicle, unarmed, ran into the woods because he was scared. He had been drinking. That's not a capital crime. And he was shot in the back 5 times. And he was laying on the ground with a severed spinal cord, perforated lungs, unable to move. And a 5th shot was delivered to the back of his head. And there was no accountability in that case. And you may be aware that I've gotten the Attorney General to undertake an unprecedented review. Most of the police violence is against socioeconomically disadvantaged people who are targeted and not given any due process. We have roughly 170 police shootings since 1990, and their record is 170 to 0, all rule justified. The police have nothing to fear from this bill. If they do their job and respect the rights of their citizens, then nothing happens. If they shoot unarmed people unjustifiably, those families now will be able to go to court and bring an action. That's all this bill's about.
Hi, and welcome to the Maine Challenge. Today, I am thrilled and honored to have as our guests Ben and Jerry, yes, of Ben and Jerry ice cream fame, who need no introduction. I am so grateful to you guys for being here. Thank you so much for joining us. I don't know if you remember, but in 2018, you guys endorsed me in the governor's race here in Maine because I was a clean elections candidate. And the only sad thing about not winning, well, there's lots of sad things about not winning, but one of them is that I understood that once I won, I would get a flavor. And so we were really working on our maple blueberry with little lobster gummies, Maine, Ben and Jerry's flavor. And, it just didn't come to pass. So, but it is great to have you here. And I know that a lot of viewers are saying, okay, 2 ice cream guys from Vermont, what are they doing talking about qualified immunity? And what do they care about this? And I definitely want to get to that. And I know that recently you have put together this amazing coalition of athletes and performing artists and organizations from both the right and left to work on this. And so, first of all, thank you for your work. But I want to start with a question because I think that your interest in this goes way back. So if you could talk to me a little bit about who Andrew Hawkins is and how he was some inspiration for you. Anybody want to take that?
I was very affected by all the deaths of unarmed Black people at the hands of police. And, even before, this has been going on for, hundreds of years, actually, that police have been killing unarmed Black people with no real justification. And, there was a spate of it happening around 2015 when Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old boy who was playing in a park with a toy gun, was shot by the police within a few seconds of them showing up. Michael Brown, of course, in Ferguson, and Eric Gardner, strangled and crushed to death in Staten Island. And so I felt like I needed to do something about it. I didn't want to just stand by and watch and say, oh, this is awful. And so Ben & Jerry's has an annual franchise meeting, and all of our franchisees from around the country and around the world come together, and they like to hear some words from the founders, and I decided to take that opportunity to talk about this issue and how we all needed to get involved, that we all needed to raise our voices. And you know, the I guess the slogan at the time was "Hands up, don't shoot," and I made up some T-shirts with that on it, and you know, was encouraging our franchisees to get involved.
Wow. Wow, great. Okay, so fast forward to May of 2020. We're in the pandemic. George Floyd is murdered at the hands of police. Let's say what really happened. And you decide to go down to Washington to the protest. What was that like?
There was a huge number of people. It was so good to see that they were mostly white people,
Mm,
and very, very peaceful. You know, a wonderful sense of camaraderie.
mm,
Uh, you know, this was at the beginning of the pandemic, and you know, people were making a decision to risk their health uh, to protest this. You know, this what had become an American way, that you know, every year or two, some black people get killed, unarmed black people get killed at the hands of police for no reason,
yeah,
uh, and people had finally had enough.
yeah,
There had been a series of, I think, 3 occurrences in rapid succession. There were 2 black joggers that were, well, a black jogger that was killed by essentially a vigilante,
right,
and you know, I don't remember right now what the third one was, but so George Floyd was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, and what was amazing really was seeing the huge uh, police and military presence,
yeah,
uh, you know, for this very, very peaceful demonstration.
yeah,
And I was just flabbergasted. I couldn't believe, you
yeah,
know, how heavy the military presence was.
yeah,
Um, and it was beautiful to see that it was all led by black people, and we were there supporting them. I felt you know, yeah, I live in Vermont. I just felt so strongly that I needed to you know, put my feet on the ground and be present to protest in you know, the strongest way that I could.
And as you said, Ben, it's been happening for a long time. This is not new. I think what's new is video. I mean, people being able to video stuff with their phones and finding out about it. But there's lots of criminal justice reform that is racist, that is, having a big impact, like cash bail and like how we incarcerate people. Why this one? Why focus on qualified immunity?
I think Ben and I first became aware of the issue after the murder of George Floyd, when there was a letter, an open letter to Congress
Mm,
written by the Players Coalition, 1,400 athletes and front office people, asking Congress to end qualified immunity. There was a bill in the House at that time, the Amash Presley bill. And the people who signed this letter were a very broad range of athletes, people you might never think of signing a letter like this. Tom Brady,
mm,
plays golf with former President Trump. And so Ben thought maybe we could engage the business community as well. So Ben and I came out with a similar letter to that, got about 700 business leaders to sign it. And then, as Ben says, we realized that just getting a couple of letters signed by a lot of people wasn't going to do the trick. So we organized, put this campaign together, the campaign to end qualified immunity. And that's what we've been working on since last summer.
So let's talk a little bit about qualified immunity itself for viewers who don't actually know what we're talking about, what we mean. When you say let's end qualified immunity, can you talk a little bit, Ben, about the doctrine and what it actually does?
It's essentially a get out of jail free card for bad cops. You know, police are the only element of our society that we authorize to use lethal force in our name. You would think we would hold them more accountable than most anyone else in society, but due to qualified immunity, we hold them less accountable than anyone in society. Qualified immunity essentially says that if you try to sue a police officer for violating your constitutional rights, or your next of kin, sues for killing your loved one, the case gets thrown out of court automatically unless you can prove that there was an exact same situation in the past where a police officer in the exact same jurisdiction was convicted for committing a crime that was exactly the same. And, the reality is there's never exactly the same situation.
Yeah.
And in all these cases where there's really no doubt that the cop committed a crime, but since some other cop in the past hadn't committed exactly the same crime, the case gets thrown out of court. And it's unjust. It's obviously absurd. It's and then it's a catch-22. You can never get a precedent for a crime that hasn't already
happened.
So the law, as they say in the legal profession, is frozen. There can never be more instances where police can be held accountable.
Right.
And the only people it protects is bad cops. I think most people don't understand that police have very strong constitutional protections, even when they make mistakes, if they are well-intentioned mistakes, even fatal mistakes. But what qualified immunity does is it essentially removes all accountability from police.
I think people understand it when there's a murder involved. That's when it comes up to the attention of the media and people pay attention. But I think there's so many lesser cases. I was reading about a case in 2014 where someone was videotaping a crime happening, police arresting someone, and the police came and seized his phone, took it all away, and said you can't do this, wiped it clean from his phone, and eliminated basically any evidence of what they had done. And when they went to court and they sued, they said, yes, your constitutional right to free speech was violated, but qualified immunity. So there's never been a case like this. So, oh, too bad. And so it's just been, so I think we don't think about the layers, all the layers, of how deep they are.
There's another case that's in the book that I wrote that talks about this black welder driving home in a Mercedes convertible, and some cop pulls him over, with no justification, obviously, just because he's a black guy in a Mercedes convertible. And the cop says, "You've got drugs here. I know you've got drugs." And the guy said, "No, I don't have drugs." He says, "I know you've got drugs." And, they go back and forth like this for a while. And then the cop searches his car, but he searches it by essentially taking the car apart. He rips the car apart, doesn't find any drugs. Then he calls in a canine team to sniff for drugs, doesn't find anything, leaves this guy by the side of the road with a car that's not inoperable. And so the guy, sued the police officer, and the case got thrown out because there's never been another case like that.
Where they tried to rip apart somebody's Mercedes, right? It's unbelievable. The cases are just absolutely unbelievable. All right, so let's pivot a little bit and talk about what it's going to take to change this, right? Because, I know that they passed it in the House. They passed the George Floyd Act in the House, which is awesome. It looks a little more daunting in the Senate, I think. But let me start by, you have succeeded in your coalition of pulling together people, I think, as you said, Jerry, people like Tom Brady and people from both the right and left, and some unexpected actors. I don't mean players. I'm saying actors and players, those two, but people, unexpected people. What is the appeal across the board? What is the thing that we can get at that pulls all these people from divided places together?
So just to mention some of the groups involved,
Yeah.
it's as broad as the ACLU and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Leadership Conference. On the libertarian side, there's the Cato Institute, there's the Institute for Justice, there's Americans for Prosperity. So there are about 20 national organizations, as well as performing artists, athletes, lawyers, former police people. And the reason is it's just a fundamentally unfair policy. It's a made up doctrine that was just created by the Supreme Court. And not only does it harm innocent people, but they cannot get any justice. So you have police who are not held accountable, and at the same time, the victims don't get any restitution. So the way to address it is by legislation. It can be done both at the federal level and it can be done at the state level, and there's activities happening in both those areas.
And so let's talk a little bit about this sort of right and left thing that's happening, as I see, and I think this is a really good example. It seems like more and more there are people disaffected on both ends of the political spectrum saying the system's not working for us. Whether that's the government in general or money in politics for sure, or things like our criminal justice system. I mean, it's just not working. So is there a chance there for us to sort of work around the sort of establishment middle that's I think holding on to their power for dear life, afraid they're going to lose it, and we come around? Is that a dynamic that you're feeling might actually happen or is happening?
That sounds like a beautiful thing. I think you're exactly right that the people who have been in power and are in power, the establishment, have become so separated from regular everyday people that and so beholden to the moneyed interests that are financing their political campaigns, and the lobbyists that are influencing the laws all the time, that they don't really hear the voice of regular people.
Right.
And they're so divorced from them. They don't, they're all quite wealthy, and they're not meeting the needs of regular everyday people. So, you've got people on the left, Bernie Sanders, who was speaking for the rights of everyday people,
Yeah.
and you've got a charlatan on the right, Donald Trump, who spoke to the needs and concerns of regular everyday people, but then went and served the needs of corporations and the wealthy. So so both sides are disaffected, and I think that if there was a true, honest candidate of the people, they'd have a good chance.
Yeah, I think.
Well, with respect to ending qualified immunity, there is some progress being made. There's certainly lots of work to be done, but in Colorado last year, qualified immunity was ended, and that was strongly bipartisan.
Wow.
New York City just ended qualified immunity. There's a bill in New Mexico that passed both houses and will likely be signed by the governor there. At the federal level, there's two bills. There's the Justice and Policing Act, which includes ending qualified immunity for now.
Yeah.
And there's a separate bill to end qualified immunity. You know, it's interesting with the Justice and Policing Act, Representative Jared Golden from Maine was one of two Democrats to vote against that. Yes. So that's, you know, that's something in Maine. And, you know, I think one of the reasons we're here talking is that there's a bill in Maine that's coming up to end qualified immunity.
Right. And I think, you know, so our congressional delegation here from Maine, we like to think of them as small but mighty, but only one of them, only Shelley Pingree, is with us on this so far. And so help us with what the opposition. So what I hear when I talk to people about this issue, what they say is, well, you know, then we're going to not let police won't be able to do their jobs. And in those split second time when they have to make a decision, all they're going to be thinking about is what lawsuit they're going to have, and they're going to lose their job. And that to me is the biggest argument. And then that's going to keep us ultimately all unsafe. That's the argument that I hear.
You know, what Sonia Sotomayor said was that qualified immunity tells police to shoot first and think second. All we're looking to do is to hold police accountable. Yeah. I wrote this book that has 16 cases of situations where justice was not served because of qualified immunity. None of them were split-second decision situations where, you know, it was you know, the officer where there was any threat to the officer's life. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, we're saying that, well, police officers, yeah, they're in a dangerous job, so they should have special get out of jail free card if they happen to murder somebody. You know, there's a lot of other people in dangerous jobs. A lot of them in Maine. You know, yes. I mean, most dangerous job in the world is working in the forest, you know, lumbering. Right. And then there's agricultural jobs are more dangerous than being a policeman. You know, they don't get any immunity from prosecution if they do something wrong and someone gets hurt. Yeah. You know, police will say, well, then if we have qualified immunity, if we get rid of qualified immunity, nobody will want to be a policeman anymore. My answer to that is, I don't want a policeman who is not willing to be held accountable. I mean, that is the big issue. It's all about accountability. Right. Cops are committing crimes and there's no accountability. They get away with it scot-free.
Yeah.
You know, we're very clear that ending qualified immunity is not an anti-police measure. We understand that the huge majority of police do an incredible job. If you go to our website, campaign to end qualified immunity.org, you'll see the first message is love the good ones, prosecute the bad ones. And, you know, as we've said, the only police who are served by qualified immunity are the bad cops.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, what kind of drives me crazy is that you have situations where a cop has obviously committed a crime, and then you have the Fraternal Order of Police get up there and defend the cop. I mean, according to the Fraternal Order of Police, there's never been a bad cop. Right. There's never been somebody who's who deserves to be prosecuted.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
Yeah, it's absurd. And they, you know, that sort of protection, that belief, you know, it's sort of like a fraternity, you know, like that, well, they call it fraternity, but, you know, that's like, okay, well, just no matter what, we defend you no matter what. And I think that that's one of the things that, you know, especially when we're looking at at how this just embodies the racism, you know, that's all throughout our society. It is like the pinnacle of what we see in terms of racism, because it is mostly brown and black people who are on the receiving end of this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, these are people that we hire and authorize to use lethal force in our name in order to protect and serve. And they are literally killing Black people in front of our very eyes.
Right.
And we're letting them get away with it.
Right, right. All over Maine, right, we see wonderful signs, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd signs, all these things. When we've had demonstrations, we had beautiful, just as much as you described in Washington, gorgeous marches here in Portland and all over the state, actually, where people came together peacefully to talk about this, to say no, protest, this is terrible. But now we have to move from protest to policy, right? As you have said. It's a great, it's great to protest, and that's important to raise up the issue. But now we have to get to policy. So for people who are watching who say, okay, so what can I do? I went to the marches. I'm horrified by what we're seeing on TV in George Floyd and what's happening in that trial. What can I do? What do we say? What do we tell them?
Well, in Maine, it's pretty easy because you have a bill in front of the legislature. So the first thing to do is to get in touch with your representatives. Representatives really listen to their constituents. They understand that, you are the guys that vote for them or not for them. So that's the first thing to do. You can visit the website, which I've mentioned, campaigntoendqualifiedimmunity.org, or there's a shorter one. What's the one you like to use, Ben?
Holdcopsaccountable.org. Both URLs will get you to the same place.
All right. Awesome.
You can put in your email and we'll get in touch with folks when there's activities to be done, ways to get involved, write a letter to the editor, op-eds, social media stuff. So we do all the hard work for you. You just have to come visit and give us your email and we'll take it from there.
Awesome.
It's amazing that it doesn't take that many calls from constituents to have your representative pay attention. Yeah. I mean, it's like 50 calls. That's a lot. That does the trick. You don't need that many of them.
Yeah. In Maine, I my first job as an advocate, a legislator told me he was overwhelmed with calls about a bill I was working on. I said, so how many is that? He said 5. I got 5 calls. So
well, in Maine, it's 5. So
right, yeah.
your voice really counts.
Yeah.
And so you can just go direct and call your guy. And like Jerry said, if you go to the website, holdcopsaccountable.org, we're monitoring the what's going on in the different states. We'll let you know when your voice counts the most, but don't wait for us. Call your rep anytime.
Absolutely. Well, so last question really quickly. So are we going to have a flavor, a whole cops accountable flavor?
I don't know.
We'll buy it. We'll send it out. We'll buy it. We'll make sure. Well, Ben and Jerry, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing us. We are busy in Maine, and we will continue to be busy on this issue and many criminal justice reform issues, but we will make sure and work hard on our congressional delegation as well. Thank you for what you do with this and getting money out of politics and using your positions as amazing, successful businessmen to make this world a better place. So I am so grateful for you being here. We look forward to having you on again, hopefully celebrating success at both the congressional and state levels. So thanks again for being with us.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for watching.